Hello, hello.
Hey there, Lucky. How's it going today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Doing all right. I shifted around. I saw you threw your two items over on the actionable agenda items. I put them down into the discussion items down below and took
Oh,
mine out
yep,
because I,
perfect.
I
Thank
had
you.
one in there for 968 already. So I just took mine out and let you take the lead on it.
Oh, no worries. Either way, thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I know we've talked about that before. I don't have a hard opinion on it. I just can't remember the reason we said should instead of must before. And that's what's bugging me.
Yeah, I don't recall it either. And the funny thing is, the code is written with a must by having a mid-empty missing.
So the mid empty missing means that if you ever build one of these with the Go, it's missing. But all of the other code around it, all of the JSON schemas, all the
Mm-hmm.
other testing and everything else, none of that requires it. And so reading it, it doesn't fail when it reads it. It's only if you
Mm.
build it using the Go. And so we only missed that one spot. But yeah, it'll be good to get that cleaned up. See, we got Amy here getting ready for KubeCon, I'm sure.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I saw that we had an agenda item for the uh meeting on Monday. So yes, please add in your things and apologies to the folks that aren't going to be joining us on site and sorry about like time zones, basically.
It it's surprising how Michigan is still on the East Coast, which makes it all the more easier for me. I've got a couple on there. Nisha took over one from me, so that looks good. And yeah, I don't think we really had a firm schedule how we're going to do it, but we're
We
really
really
good at
don't.
just
It's one of those
talking.
things where like we just wanted to be able to make sure there was space because we do so
Yeah,
well with being like again, this call has very little agenda usually, and then we usually end up filling an hour. So I anticipate doing the same thing there. So
we have lots of stuff to talk about, and
I
I can put
know.
together a couple of slides on the things I want to talk about.
Okay, that is completely fine. I see Phil has joined as well. Phil, do you have things for next week? Not to summon Phil.
Yeah, I don't. I've looked at the HackMD. I don't have anything to add, but I'll definitely be there.
The
That
FOMO
works.
grows.
And I have just basically like taken this particular Zoom room and called it that room as well because everyone knows where this is, mostly.
Works for me. Cool. Looks like we're getting a quorum here today. So the one thing I put on the actionable items is 957. I I don't see Sajay here for this, but he put a request out a while back for any of the image spec maintainers. Do we have an image spec maintainer here other than me? Because mine's already on there. No, I'm just talking to the ether at that point. Yeah, so we just need to get another set of eyes on that one. It looked good to me, and I think that's just going to be a prerequisite to a lot of the stuff you're talking about, Lockie. It puts a lot of these changes in there already. So hopefully a maintainer will jump in there at some point here. But yeah, he was going through, Sajay did a really good job going through this one, getting all the different tests. Oh, good. John showed up just because he knew I was talking about him. We're talking about 957, John. Just need another set of eyes on there and hopefully get that one merged at some point soon. Just to harass you since you're here.
So I'm here.
I'll drop the link in whenever you get a chance, but I just figured it's been sitting out there for a little bit. Sajay did a good job going through all the places we're missing things and cleaning up the spec for us. So it looked like it was ready to merge. So that was one actionable item. Next week, anybody have other agenda items for our chat at KubeCon on the 24th? Who's going to be at the thing on the 24th?
Phil
I'm
said
supposed to see a
yes.
whole lot of I'm supposed to see a whole lot of hands raised at that.
getting there.
Okay.
We're getting there. Also, that is Monday.
I'll be there.
Monday.
Yeah, Vincent. So I think V Bats is going to be there, right? I mean, he was the instigator.
Yeah, I will be remote, but hopefully there will be people that show up and people that attend virtually too. And feel free to add more agenda items on there. I can always pull some of mine off if people don't want to talk about my stuff. I'm not picky. I just want to talk OCI things.
I will be there in person, but not until Monday night, so I'll join remotely. But I'd love to, if anyone's going to be there, I'll love to see you.
I thought you were going to say you're going to be recovering from a pub crawl the night before from all the different odd parties going on the whole.
No, I just, it's a long week, so I decided to come in later on Monday.
Everybody I hear is going to there is like, there's so many side events. I don't know how to handle these side events. Cool. That's the small stuff to start with. Lockie, I think we should probably turn it over to you to talk about the artifact type.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Brandon. I'll just put it in the chat, the issue we're referring to. So it came up the other day when we were doing some work with artifact type that what's written in the spec is a should, and all the examples are a should. And in the Go code, there is a must. And we've tried to figure out what the decision or whether any prior decisions were made on should or a must. And that's happening in the issue 968, which I've linked there. So thanks, Brandon, for digging up where some of this work had happened in the past. But I guess, is there any issues with me putting out some kind of vote on how to make this happen, or are there feelings either way?
Yeah, welcome, Sajay. We're already talking about your stuff earlier. I'll throw in my quick one, which is I don't have a hard opinion on this one. I just want to make sure whatever we pick, we do it earlier rather than later, because changing is after the fact. As much as we say it's easy to change and easy to relax, it causes challenges if you change a should to a must or a must to a should later on, just whether you're talking about servers or clients and what part of the process it is, somebody's going to get broken in the process.
I have a question. Could someone, or rather a request, can someone give me an example or a scenario where artifact type would not be present?
Well, we already had someone that tried that the other day. I'm not saying it's a good example. I'm just saying that people look at the spec, they read it, and they just use it as is. Let me see if I can find it all. Keep on discussing amongst yourselves. I'll find it.
Well, the reason why I ask is because if I recall correctly, the reason why we have artifact type is to support the API for querying artifacts that have a certain type, that is a certain type. And if that's the case, then shouldn't this be must in order for the API to return something?
So if you don't have an artifact type, the two options are either A, you can't filter on this specific thing, or B, you have to submit a query with an empty string. And I'm flexible with either. But I did find the one example, and like I say, not saying it's a good example, but as soon as people start reading this, they come up and just say, okay, here's our media type. We put a couple things in there. We've got a couple layers, and they throw a whole bunch of data and annotations for them to key off of.
Personally, I'm a little scared about letting people do whatever they want with something that is like, you may use this, you may not use this. I don't know.
I feel like the people that care about having an artifact type are the ones that want to do a query for their one artifact. And so they're motivated to put the artifact type on their artifacts.
Well, so, but implementing an API that, checks for whether the artifact type is a valid artifact type versus, implementing an API that just knows, okay, I am expecting this because that's what the specification says. Well, the latter is easier for implementers, I think. And it's not something that is difficult for a client to insert there. I don't know. I don't like vagueness. That's it.
Yeah, I think, where I got to on it, Nisha, was, obviously for filtering, right? I expect tools to be like, hey, I want to pull the SBOMs associated with this image, right? There is no server-side validation that if you say, you declare its artifact type is SBOM, that it is indeed an SBOM, right? There's no server that says, oh, you said it's an SBOM, I will validate that this is indeed an SBOM. I don't believe, the thing I was trying to key off in my thought is, how does the platform OS stuff used, right? It doesn't, the server doesn't actually say, oh yeah, that's actually the correct hardware platform type and has the appropriate headers in there. It just says, shove that thing in there. You said it's this platform. And then you have to validate it at the runtime that it is indeed that platform. So I just thought about it like, platform OS, being able to narrow down exactly what you want. So I just imagine an artifact with hundreds of signatures, hundreds of SBOMs, hundreds of attestations. And without this field, you go, okay, I got to pull them all and then figure out which one is which. So if you do this, at least you could say, well, I have declared that this is an SBOM, so you could at least start with that narrower scope. That's what I think the value is there of artifact type, and that's why I'd push on it being a must, just to spare the registry pulling everything and then pulling every blob and then figuring out what the hell it is, because you didn't have a place or require a place to say what you're declaring it is.
Should a registry really be digging? Sorry, Nisha.
Should a registry be digging? You mean?
Should a registry be digging through the blobs and whatnot to try to identify something, or should it just say, hey, I don't know what that is? You get an unknown icon for it.
Yep. I don't think a registry should dig through it, right? Does it dig through it for other things like OS? Does it actually say, yeah, this is a legit platform?
Yeah, they do look at config. Different operators do look at the config blob, but that's also because the config blob has a good schema defined in it. So the media type can be used to kind of like crack open that.
Let me throw the flip question, because I think a lot of the comments are saying, hey, if we don't have the artifact type, that makes it more difficult for the registries trying to figure out what they have and more difficult to communicate and filter and whatnot. Does making this field required, say it right? If we make the field required, does that put more effort on registries to do more validation of this input? Because right now, all we validate is that you have a media type.
Wouldn't that be another conformance test for registry?
I'm just thinking of overhead for registries if they don't want to do any filtering or whatnot on this at all, and just say, if you upload with these 6 media types, we'll allow it. And all they're looking at is this top level media type. And if all they look at is this media type versus the image media type versus the index media type, they just see anything that lists and they say, okay, that's approved, it's valid, and we're going to accept it. That's not a lot of work on them. Once you say, okay, if you see it's an artifact, now you need to parse this manifest apart. You need to look and find out the artifact type, make sure it's a valid string, parse that string, and make sure that string itself is
valid.
Unknown. Yeah.
No, an IANA.
At least in an IANA format. It doesn't have to be registered, but in a format. So you're parsing that string apart. Are we making more work on the registries at that point is what I'm asking.
Wouldn't the registry already have that implemented somewhere else?
Yeah, it's going to be work, but it's already cracking open the media type and passing that as an IANA, right?
They already
So
parse those JSON, but it's just individual fields in there.
Fields,
What
yeah.
they parse right now is the list of blobs to look at those. I'm just throwing the question out more just to try to get some of the registry maintainers to jump in and say, no big deal, or yeah, it's an extra bit of overhead we don't want to deal with. Go for it, John.
I have opinions, but I feel bad because I've been absent when all the decisions were made, so I don't even have context for why they were made, and I'm too lazy to go back and watch all the recordings. I mean, my problem mostly with artifact type being must everywhere is that I can't use the refers API in the way that I thought it was going to work. But I don't know that we can walk that back. I think it's probably too late.
Well, is it only because it only becomes an issue when it's a must, John? That you can't use this API the way that you thought you would?
Well, so I'd like to be able to use this API to like walk back other relationships, not just artifact manifest to things, like say an index to an image. That would be a nice way to use the refers API. But like in the way everything's worded, it's all about the subject field and artifact manifest because it's all about the artifact manifest and artifact type.
This is kind of what I wanted to hear, John, because I think we had to start with that scoping, but I always thought this API could be used for other things, and we don't want to like shoehole it into only being used for this. But if we came with something that was, hey, you can use it every way you like, nobody would have ever gotten to the RC point. So, but I had that same thought is, what does the must hog tie us to here? Because if there are other things you could do with this API that we aren't looking at. And that's really what I want to know is,
yeah,
you know.
So, right. So from a registry perspective, it's easy to go from like a must to a should or may, as in like, oh yeah, we can relax this requirement. But like from a client perspective, if something used to be a must and you write some code that assumes that field is always going to be there, then, you know, let's say later on we say, oh, okay, we're going to use this for other stuff. So artifact type is may now. Then like you potentially break a bunch of clients that assume that already exists. But yeah, like what I would like to do is use the refers API to say, you know, give me all the indexes that reference this image. And as long as artifact type is a must in the refers API, that doesn't make sense. But you know, that's not exactly the question you asked me. But it's related to like I can't answer your question without kind of talking about that. Yeah, the other thing is like right now, kind of all of the tables that exist in my head are based on like descriptors of things. And so for the refers API, like if we're just returning descriptors of things as metadata, that's easy. But like if I have to pull out artifact type, then now that's like a backfill of things. It's kind of annoying. And I mean, similar thing with annotations, but that's a different issue again. Artifact type for me is a little bit cumbersome, but I'm interested in like what other people think, because again, I'm coming to this with like no context that all of y'all have, and I apologize.
The one thing I'll say is we don't know what people are going to use this for farther down the road. So John's coming in with different ideas of what he might throw in there. The fact that the only must in here is the media type and everything else in here is optional means that other fields in here are also potentially that we haven't defined, potentially be added into this, either in the future or maybe a user comes up with their own implementation doing their own thing. Go ahead, Nisha.
We added the refers field in the image manifest. but we didn't add it in index, I think.
The subject
was-
is in artifact and image. You can't have the subject in
No,
the
not
index.
not the subject, but the refers. Let me see.
The refers API, you can ask for refers to anything. But
So
the
then
subject that defines that reverse link was only in the 2. In other words, subject can point to anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Got it. I forgot we changed the name of that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So subject can point to anything. So this can point to an index or any other manifest out there. But we only added this field onto the artifact in the image. We didn't add on to the index because once you add on to the index, you can create loops.
I still object to, sorry, Nisha, I object to that, but I'm not sure that we're talking about the same thing.
You object to not having a subject on the index?
Well, no, I don't think it creates loops, but we have this conversation every other week, so I kind of want to give up on that fight because I think I don't understand what you're saying and you don't understand what I'm saying, maybe.
So the loop is only there if you treat the subject like a reverse pointer. And so if this was an index, you can have the manifests that are part of the index, some chain down that already exist. Those are your forward children, and then you can make a reverse pointer with the subject to that same child if you had on the index.
Right. I don't think it's like correct to just think of it as a reverse pointer because it's a different kind of pointer.
It is, but the way we're going to encourage people to use it for garbage collection and whatnot. Saji, I see your hand up.
It was more about just time check. I'm hoping we can close on the first issue, right? Which is whether we want this must, should, or just leave it as it is. Right now, I think the point is that the spec is inconsistent with the Go files. So we have to get that sorted out as well. And I do kind of agree with what John was saying, which is we have had a couple of discussions whether we could query using the referers API other things like layers and blobs that a manifest refers or an index refers. We can do like really interesting things, but if the artifact type is a must, then that filter becomes a important criteria everywhere. I don't have a strong opinion on whether it should be a should or a must, and if there are folks who really want it to be a must, then
yeah, the filter for me, it's an optional filter. So I don't know that breaks it if this is a must, it breaks using the filter for, or if this is a should, it breaks using that filter for certain things that you want to filter on, unless you accept an empty string for a filter. But it doesn't mean you can't run this query without the filter and get all the artifacts back.
Makes sense. There's nothing breaking at this point the way I'm seeing it, even if it's a should.
It doesn't handle the other situations in there that John's thinking of. But I do want to circle back real quick because I saw John come off mute and I got so excited. From the registry operator standpoint, if this is a must and you need to parse this artifact type string and verify that it's in an IANA format, is that concerning at all for a registry to validate that?
Is that a pointed question at me or a generic question to everyone?
Pointed to you or anyone that runs a registry.
Like a registry provider.
Yeah. So you or Michael.
I don't think I would actually validate that it's like consistent with IANA's RFCs, but like it is only burdensome that I have to return that field in the refers API for the reasons we just talked about. Like, I don't know that I would even validate the format. You know?
Yeah. How about Michael Brown?
Can you repeat the question?
If we're changing this from a should to a must, that implies that the registry operator themselves would now validate this field on artifacts that are being uploaded. And so is it an extra burden on
validate that
you?
it complies to the RFC, or just validate that it's present?
I would say both, but at a minimum, that is present.
Yeah. I guess I think, is there a huge benefit of validating that it is a real media type? I was kind of picturing people, I mean, we can say they should use like an RFC compliant, RFC 6838 compliant media type, but I don't know if there's a lot of value in saying we'll reject the manifest if it contains someone's custom string.
Go ahead, Nisha.
Could someone do me a favor and document somewhere why making the artifact type should would help with the, I guess the word I'm hearing is interesting future things. I would like if someone was able to document what these interesting future things are. So we have it there. If we come back to this in another couple of months and find out like, oh, someone has a complaint, why did we decide on this? I think that would be useful for me anyway.
It's always hard to predict the future of what someone's going to use a spec for that you don't know in advance.
It sounds like, I mean,
I
it
think
sounds
just
like
documenting our decision here is enough in an issue, because that's what's caught us before.
Yep.
But I'd like to also, but I'd like to also know like what this, what exactly are you using the subject? I mean the artifact type for, like what else is it being used for other than filtering?
I think the answer is it wouldn't be used at all. You would be shoving other bits of information in those other optional fields.
Or even making up your own fields.
Or even making up your own field.
Oh, hold up. Yeah, you can add your own. Okay, there's like annotations, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And the annotations may be used to filter the response down the last line there.
Okay.
That's a future looking statement. I don't think we ever. So filter on the client side, not on the server side. Where I was going with other fields is we have media type, we have blobs, subject annotations. Someone could upload if I'm doing my own little side project, some kind of other magic layers, call it something different. And not the same name as any of these other things. It's my own field. Could be my own structure, all my own data.
Mm-hmm.
You could upload in this thing a field called signature, and it could be a complex tree of all kinds of data structure in there.
Okay, got it.
So we're back to not making a decision, it sounds like, or do we need to do a vote?
No, I think I'm just like trying to document it somewhere in the notes.
Yeah.
But you sold me. You
sold
me. Yeah, you sold me with the should.
With the should. Have I sold Lockie though? Because Lockie's the one that jumped in on this one, and I want to make sure.
Well, I guess the thing that we've always been was if we rally around the specific supply chain security use case, it gave us grounds to actually move this forward at a reasonable rate. If we came in and said, let's create an API that does anything you want and reference it, we would have never made it here. But now that we're here, we wouldn't have ever made it here in this amount of time, I don't think, because we didn't have small enough a scope to make a change. But now that we're here, given John's comments is, well, what else could you do with this thing if we're going to land it anyway? I feel like not being so myopically focused on, now I'm thinking of it. I was thinking of it through the scope of the supply chain security things. I want an SBOM, I want an attestation, I want a signature. That's going to basically be purely up to convention, essentially, if that artifact type field is used. You may be incentivized to do it because registry providers might index it and filter it, right? Much as the tag listing API is used today with SHA.sig or SHA.att. I guess the hope is that those things end up in an artifact type and or represented in fallback scenarios. But if we're willing to say, look, this could be used for other things, that's just a different it's a different set of parameters for me to rationalize the thought on the should and the must. And if that's the context, then I'm okay with the should. And if it's okay that, if you pass an empty string in or just say search, you get all of them and nobody uses this field, then there might be implications of, end clients just going, okay, I got to pull the lot, every blob and figure it out. And that may be fine because they're probably doing that today, honestly. But, through the tag listing API.
For me, it's a minimum requirement. So someone that says, hey, I've got a movie library I want to upload to this thing. And I know what I'm tagging the stuff with. My tag tells me everything I need to know. I just want to have a media type that lets me put whatever I want in this field. They can extend and use this for whatever they want to do, however they want to use it, put whatever fields in there they want. It becomes an empty bucket for them to fill in however they need to. And to be clear, I still think this is a should. And I think that 95, 99% of our artifacts that we ever see up there on our registry will have this filled out. I'm hoping that annotations is also going to be 90-some% of the artifacts uploaded will have that as well. We only say it's optional, but I hope that most of them do.
Do you think that satisfies, like, if I go back to the working group, there are some requirements for receiving updates and organizing things and trying to figure out the latest thing that was uploaded?
Yeah, because that was all pinned off annotations anyway. So that, that was never in artifact type specifically, as my understanding. You could create conventions and then filter on them with that last line here in your referrers API, but that was never like hard-coded in a field.
And I think what we've done is we've set the system up so that can be done, but we're not setting the system up so that it must be done on everything that's uploaded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does that gel with your thinking about this, Lucky?
Yeah, I'm more inclined with a should given other use cases. I'm more inclined with a must, only myopically looking at supply chain security tooling.
Okay, got it.
Right, but that's actually covered in convention today. It's not codified in specification. So, as truth would have it, it's working today in registries, and they probably will use this field anyway. It just gives them a place to put that in a sane format, rather than kind of using tag name convention. You could put it here. So, I mean, but I think there are other things that we might get like hamstrung by later. Like, oh, you could use this thing rather than, okay, we need to go create yet another API to do, kind of what John was alluding to. We could actually use this thing and say, okay, we can stuff this data in here, and, it makes this API more flexible.
So does this mean everyone is should on this?
I think I was the only must. So regardless of my opinion anymore, I
mean, I still want to understand where, okay.
Well, I think the good thing is I was trying to dig into what John was saying too. I think John's context was useful here, and I couldn't kind of grok what John was asking yesterday. So I don't even know if the artifact type definition and examples, like we even have to broach that if it's a should. I don't know if John was just trying to, pass that as if it's a must, then I have to understand it more. But if it's a should, I don't know if I care about it at all. And we don't need to change anything. So that's, there were the two things I wanted to kind of answer. So are we at a should? I'll go put update the issue, and then you've already put the PR in. If there are some, I guess, image spec maintainers, it's actually already a should. It's just representing that we just missed one place. So I don't know that you actually need a bunch of approvals here, right? You're going to need approvals to get the thing merged, but I don't think it needs to be a broad sending out on the mailing list, doing a vote.
Yeah, we're not changing anything at this point. Given that, I think that's an easy fix to get that merged in. I think I've already got one approval on that, which is surprising. And so the biggest action item I want to take from this is that we capture this discussion in the issue, make sure that we're all in agreement. That way, when we come back to it later on, we know where to find this.
Okay, I'll do my best to summarize my perspective, but feel free if anybody else wants to add theirs too, just so that it's on the record when we come back in years and go, why did we do this? And then we can be kind of open closed.
Will do.
And then if that's the case, the second question was, do we need to change this definition, make it more clearer, and update the examples? If we're going to go for a should, given that John raised this, do we need to do anything with that, or do we just leave it as is?
I think the examples can still use a little bit of clarification, but I want to make sure that we clarify it from the perspective of someone that's reading this from the first time, because I think a lot of us have been heads down in this for so long. We know where we're trying to go. And so hearing John's perspective is really useful to me. That's reading this for the first time saying, what on earth did you guys do? That's super helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a little bit that way. I kind of wanted to talk about the artifact type field if we feel like we've resolved the thing. Well, actually, let me look at the agenda. Maybe I'm jumping on somebody.
No, I think that's it.
That's the next topic, huh?
I think that was it. So I was trying to rush through this to save more time because you had a big question out there and I want to make sure we covered it. So take it away, John.
Okay. Yeah. So as a registry operator, I think I wouldn't care that much about the artifact type field other than the fact that the refers API seems to require it. But as like a client author, I think the current definition of artifact type is a little lacking because as reading it, it seems like it could mean 3 or 4 different things. And I think having maybe some intention of the field is useful. Like what I imagine this is a media type that represents something that has been wrapped in this artifact manifest envelope. Right. So like more or less to hide it from the registry, right? Like if if we didn't have registries, then we wouldn't really care about the artifact type because you could just push arbitrary things with whatever media type you want. But because like registries have to parse this JSON and care about it in order to maintain invariance of their relationships between, I can't say artifacts, between various other things, like for example, for garbage collection, we have a static structure for the manifest, but we want to support arbitrary artifact types. So like this artifact type is just a string that says, hey, I know I'm an artifact manifest, but you should interpret me as though I were this other thing, right? Is that roughly what this means? Did I miss something?
That's spot on.
Cool. Okay. That seems fine. I think maybe some more verbiage to express that in a more eloquent way than I have would be really helpful for folks. Like,
would it be helpful if the output of what Nisha and I've been thinking about, which is to come out and say, if you're uploading this specific type of SBOM, this is what all the fields look like. If you're uploading this specific type of signature, this is what all the fields look like. To start capturing that and documenting it of specific use cases as examples, but just capturing, okay, that other people have already defined what their media types are. Here's how you apply that to this artifact type, how you apply it to the blobs and all those descriptors. So that I think it gives a common place for people to come look and say, I'm trying to query for this SBOM. I need to know what fields to put in my search query. I need to know what fields to put all, that I'm looking for, to have that captured in one place. Does that help what you're looking for on your side?
I don't know. Like, you're saying examples of real world things or like made up examples?
I want to go real world at this point. I think we've done ice cream a little bit too much. I want to actually say, let's take Cyclone DX, SPDX. They've got their own media types out there. They've got their well-known formats. How does it look like? What are the actual media types? What is the actual artifact type? What is the actual descriptor media type for the blob? What annotations do we expect to see? So that anybody writing a tool to generate it and anybody writing a tool to read it are talking the same language. And they're not having some kind of miss because one person put the plus JSON on the end of a string.
If there are real world examples, I think that's a good idea.
I don't think there are real world examples, but we're going to have to show them the paved path for how we think that API should work when using things like the Cyclone DX.
Trying to figure out, we had an example somewhere. Here. When we went through and defined the artifacts themselves, we came out and said, if you're doing a Helm chart, this is your actual media type you're doing here. We don't own this. This is owned by the Helm group. But we actually said, this is your specific media type you're going to put in the config descriptor. So anybody that's writing it, anybody that's reading it knows where to find it. So I'm thinking along, this is kind of where my mind is going, of saying, let's capture some of this stuff and say, this is exactly what that field is going to be for this thing when you upload it.
Yeah, I think as examples, it's useful. I don't want to become like a registry of these things.
Yeah, and we don't own, like, I'm assuming the Singularity group did their own thing, did their own IANA registration. We're not trying to claim their thing. We're just trying to say, when you do it, here's what it looks like. The reason I'm pushing for that is the blob media type. It can be a lot of things. Application gzip is perfectly valid, but that's not useful if you really want to capture that as JSON gzip versus XML gzip. So trying to capture this stuff, maybe there's a full, Helm, vendor config Helm dot whatever dot gzip or something like that. Maybe that's what you want it to be. There are a lot of possibilities for those fields, and trying to capture all that in one place means that if somebody's writing one side of the tool and someone's writing the other side of the tool, they're talking the same language. I don't know if that solves the challenge you're looking at, though, because I feel like
I just think we need probably at the top, like we explained the goal of the artifact manifest, and that is useful. I think maybe fleshing that out a little bit more to like the rationale for like, oh, hey, like here's why there are two media types. I know it's very confusing, but it makes sense. I promise. You know.
Yeah. So the media type of the contain the media type of the reference artifact. Need a better statement than that.
Yeah, I like maybe some verbiage that describes this thing as an envelope for other things. I want to say it's a container, but that's a terrible word in this context. Yeah, the artifact manifest is like an envelope for arbitrary things, and here's how some examples of those arbitrary things and how they have defined this wrapping. It would be, I think, useful. Mostly, I really don't like the current example because I think it's very misleading. Oh, sorry, Nisha.
Oh, no, I was actually going to agree with you that that's probably the term referenced artifact is misleading and needs to be elaborated a little more. I think the first time we had tried to describe it, it was more like this property should be used, or this property should be of the form media type and should contain a descriptor of the artifact. And I think the descriptor, using a descriptor here was also confusing, because that's what it is. It's a descriptor that's pointing to or that's describing an artifact, I guess.
Yeah, but my reading of the artifact type, I actually thought for a second that it was talking about the subject, but
yeah, I got it.
I think maybe I should send a PR.
Now your confusion makes all the more sense. So the better we can explain that, yeah. Like I say, pull request welcome. I do want to take time for your other comment, John, because you had the good one.
Which one?
And we've gone back and forth on this bunch, but 357 over on distribution in the issue, where you said, hey, why are we responding back with annotations? That's a horrible thing. And I get your concern. You're not alone in your concern. Michael's over there doing the song and dance right now, saying, yes, preach. I threw the scenario up there, the problem that we're looking at, which is that if we're trying to filter on a random artifact type, the artifact type itself isn't enough when you have a lot of these things pushed to a registry. And so there may be certain kinds of artifacts where you'll have multiples of them, and being able to figure out which one you want out of the multiple comes down to needing those annotations. So if we don't ship that in the response, it means we're pulling every single manifest, which for some scenarios would be very bad.
Yeah, so how I would imagine solving this, and it's not great, but sometimes you probably don't want like all of the annotations in the response, right? Maybe I just literally want the descriptors, and there's like, when this is a must, there's no way to indicate like, oh, actually I don't care about annotations, which is a little annoying because those can be arbitrarily large, and so the registry might pay some price for that. One like not great alternative to having registry serve annotations is to use the data field to just like include the entire thing so that clients can parse that out and look at whatever fields they want, not just the annotations, right? I know that's not great, but
I don't know if we can do that and guarantee the 4 megabyte limit. Because if you take a manifest that's already 4 megs and you wrap it in the data field, it gets bigger.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we can, that's what pagination's for, right?
Yeah, but the page is for individual descriptors. Each descriptor is going to be, if you put a data field on there, one descriptor will be longer than 4 megs.
Right, but this response isn't like a manifest. I mean, it is. The structure is a manifest list, but this isn't something that is uploaded by a user. The registry kind of knows how big things are, and it can decide, you know.
Yeah, but the thing that's wrapped in there, because your concern is these annotations get big. So potentially we know the limit of someone uploading a lot of annotations today, which is the 4 meg limit that we specified for the manifest. You can't put more annotations than you would fill up a whole thing. So potentially someone's going to upload an image manifest or an artifact manifest with a whole bunch of annotations and get you close to that 4 megabyte limit. If you then take that, put that in a descriptor as a data field, it's bigger than 4 megs just for that one descriptor. And then you return that within your index. Just one descriptor in the index is more than 4 megs.
Right, but the 4 meg like suggestion doesn't force registries not to return like larger payloads. This is about like, if you want a portable artifact, it shouldn't be larger than 4 megs because some registries won't respect that. But the registry can return that pretty trivially, right? They serve blobs.
It can.
Like the client should be able to handle more than 4 meg response, I would think.
They should, but I think the reason we specified 4 megs is that clients now know that they don't have to. And so you might see some tools out there that implement that limit. If they see something coming back more than 4 megs, they might reject it at the client side.
I think it's the opposite. I think the 4 meg is a recommendation not to have things larger than that so that it is supported by registries.
The registry supports up to 4 megs, and the client knows that it shouldn't see something beyond that. It shouldn't upload and it shouldn't receive.
Right, but this is like, we're not pulling a manifest. This is like an API call. So like, hey, give me a list of things. And so it's a little bit different in my mind because it's a synthesized thing. It's not like something you address by digest that you can't manipulate in ways, right? Again, like putting the entire thing in the data field is a little gross because it's larger than the annotations would be. But it means that I don't have to store annotations separately or fetch them. Like if I always have to serve annotations, then I always need to fetch this thing, or I need to store it. But if it's an optional thing, then like I can just serve up descriptors, which is what I want to do. And like clients can do N+1. Yes, Locke.
You're jogging my memory to how we pulled artifact type up, because artifact type was an annotation. And we were just saying, hey, you have to serve up and pass all those annotations. We said, hey, how about we just pull one up into the field? And that was the one we did. And then we said, well, you can do both. Because I was like, hey, you don't want to have to dig into annotations, because I've seen this movie in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
But we kind of hedged on well, you can do both, but we pulled out. Wasn't that how it went? That's how we ended up with that artifact type, right, Brandon?
The middle ground, because originally we were saying you could filter on any annotation. And so the middle ground was, we said, you're only going to filter on artifact type, but you're going to return the artifact type and the annotations. And so the client can do the filtering beyond that on the annotations if the client needs to do that. So we tried to find that medium ground where we still had the annotations there for the clients to use, but the registry didn't have to do any filtering or processing. They just had to pass them through, which I get isn't great. but it was kind of like the middle ground. One comment I'll put on the data field, if we pass it through that, you can also have artifacts with the data field. And so they can be arbitrarily large. What's that?
But they wouldn't be larger than 4 megs, right?
They wouldn't be larger than 4 megs, but the artifacts might be a couple lines and the data field might be pretty large within that one artifact.
Yeah, I guess like it is weird. I get the blessing of artifact type as like, oh, this is a very special annotation. I think that's useful and like maybe worth the trouble of projecting that into a database schema so that like that use case is fast and efficient. But to do also annotations seems like a half measure, and I'd rather just send you the whole thing. Because I'm gonna have to query for the whole thing and parse out the annotations, and it's actually way easier for me to just ship you the whole manifest if you want it.
Yeah,
I think I may have misunderstood something. What's the difference between what do you mean by parsing out the annotations? Don't you just return the value of annotations?
Right. Well, I have to basically parse the manifest and grab the annotations field, and then graft that onto the refers API response. Or I need to do that on push and stuff it in a database somewhere, which I don't want to do, really, because like they can be fairly large.
Okay, this is where I think I misinterpreted. I think I wasn't thinking that annotations would be grafted onto the refers API. I was thinking that it's an optional place where you can put things for more sophisticated filtering, but the client will do that, not the registry.
So the server isn't doing the filtering on the server side, but it is returning it to the client so the client can do it on the client side. And
yeah,
just doing that is overhead for the registry because now they have to maintain this for every one of the things.
Sorry, so I didn't, can you repeat that? I missed it.
Yeah, every descriptor that they generate for this, so that if we have an image out there that we're referring to, they have to not only maintain that here's the artifact type for this descriptor and this digest, but here's the list of annotations. And tracking that data for every descriptor that they're going to return this response is overhead for the registries that they prefer not to manage. It's an arbitrarily long, not arbitrarily, but relatively potentially long string for them to manage.
I see. Okay. So that's why it's easier to just like return the whole manifest. And that's not possible in the way that we've defined this spec.
You could put the data field there. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, right. Like I could do that, but per how this is currently defined, I also have to parse out annotations and add that here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't think that was the intention, or at least that wasn't the. I didn't think that was the intention in my mind. I don't know about everyone else.
It matches my vision, but I was one writing half this stuff. We kind of ran up against time here. Do we want to keep going in the issue? I don't feel like we've given you a good answer there, John.
No, I don't think so.
We've given you a bad answer.
That's okay. I will comment on the.
Yeah, you're not the first to ask. So I would also say, get Mike Brown in there as well. Anybody on the registry side that needs to implement this, because I want to make sure we do something that you're both going to approve of. Cool. See everybody on Monday. Put together some good
See you
slides.
Monday.
All right. For everybody
right.
traveling to KubeCon, safe trips.
Thanks.
Safe travels.
Bye.
I guess.